There is a moment every intelligent person knows. You are in a room. Someone is speaking, and as they speak, you feel something shift inside you. Not anger, not frustration, something colder than that. Silence. Not the silence of having nothing to say. The silence of realizing there is absolutely nothing worth saying. Schopenhauer called it one of the heaviest burdens a mind can carry. The inability to find a single person around you who thinks at the level you think. And he did not say that with arrogance. He said it with grief, because here is the truth no one tells you. Intelligent people do not go silent because they have nothing to offer. They go silent because they have too much, and they have finally learned that pearls mean nothing to swine. Schopenhauer was not a gentle man. He did not believe in flattering humanity. He looked at the world as it was, not as people wished it to be, and what he saw disturbed him. He wrote that the majority of men are driven not by reason, not by reflection, but by will, raw, blind, animal will, the desire to consume, to be seen, to dominate conversation, to be right, not because they have reasoned their way to truth, but because their ego demands it. The fool, to Schopenhauer, is not a stupid person in the simple sense. The fool is someone trapped entirely inside the prison of their own desires, their own impulses, their own very small world. And they do not even know they are imprisoned. They react, they never reflect. They speak before they think, because thinking is uncomfortable. It demands you confront things about yourself you would rather not see. And here is the dangerous part. The fool is loud. The fool is confident. The fool fills every room with noise. And because they fill it with noise, people assume they fill it with meaning. Schopenhauer saw through this. He wrote that the more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. Think about that. The fool has all the answers. The intelligent person is haunted by questions. And in a world that rewards certainty, the quiet man looks weak, while the loudest one in the room gets treated like a leader. This is the first trap. And if you are an intelligent person who has not understood this yet, you are probably still bleeding from it. At some point in your life, you tried to reason with a fool. Maybe you tried to explain something carefully. You laid out your logic. You were patient. You were fair. And they did not hear a single word of it. Not because they could not process the words, but because they were never listening to your argument. They were waiting for their turn to speak. They were constructing their next point before you even finished your first sentence. Schopenhauer understood this completely. He wrote an entire book cataloging the tactics people use in argument, not to find truth, but to win, to dominate, to survive the conversation with their ego intact. And here is what the intelligent person eventually learns, the painful, expensive way. You cannot win an argument with someone who is not playing by the same rules as you. You are seeking truth. They are seeking victory. These are not the same game. When you walk into that dynamic and try to reason, you have already lost. Because you are in a boxing ring with someone willing to bite, gouge, and headbutt while you are standing there with your gloves up, waiting for the bell. The fool does not feel shame when they are logically cornered. They do not pause and reconsider. They escalate, they deflect, they attack your character. They bring up something irrelevant from 3 years ago. They get louder, and you start to doubt yourself, not because you are wrong, but because the sheer force of their certainty starts to feel like evidence. This is one of the most insidious things fools do to intelligent people. They make you question your sanity. Schopenhauer's answer was brutal in its simplicity. Do not engage, not out of cowardice, out of recognition, There is no dialogue to be had. There is no meeting of minds. There is only your energy being consumed by someone who will feel nothing when you walk away exhausted. Here is something nobody prepares you for. Intelligence is not a gift, not entirely. Yes, it gives you clarity. It gives you the ability to see through illusions, to anticipate consequences, to understand what most people miss. But it also means you see the mediocrity, you see the pettiness, you see the games people play, the manipulation dressed up as friendship, the envy dressed up as concern, the ignorance dressed up as opinion. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Schopenhauer lived with this his entire life. He was brilliant, and he was deeply lonely, not because he pushed people away carelessly, but because the deeper he went into truth, the further he got from the kind of easy, comfortable connection that most people settle for. He watched people around him chasing things: status, money, approval, sensation. And he understood with a kind of cold clarity that most of them would never stop running long enough to ask whether the thing they were chasing was even real. He called this the will, the endless, churning engine of desire that drives human beings forward without ever letting them rest. And for most people, that engine runs unexamined their entire lives. The intelligent person has examined the engine, and that examination comes at a cost. You start to feel a distance between you and the noise, between you and the small talk, between you and the conversations that go nowhere, the ambitions that are just status games in disguise, the friendships built on convenience rather than anything real. That distance is not arrogance. Do not let anyone tell you it is. It is the natural consequence of thinking deeply in a world that rewards thinking shallowly. And it is heavy. So what does the intelligent person do? They go quiet. Not the quiet of defeat, the quiet of a man who has understood something that others have not reached yet. Schopenhauer wrote that the wise man will, above all, strive to avoid the unnecessary and futile expenditure of energy. Every word you waste on someone who cannot receive it is energy that could have gone toward your work, your craft, your inner life. The intelligent person learns, slowly, often painfully, that silence is not emptiness. Silence is conservation. Silence is the refusal to pour living water into cracked vessels. Think about the greatest minds in history, the ones who changed the world, the ones who created things that outlasted them by centuries. They were not the loudest people in the room. They were often the most isolated, most misunderstood, most dismissed by their contemporaries, because real intelligence is not performative. It does not need an audience to feel valid. It does not require constant validation from people who are not qualified to give it. The fool needs to win every argument because his identity depends on it. Remove his victory and he collapses. The intelligent person needs nothing from the fool. And that needlessness is what makes the fool so furious. There is nothing more enraging to a small mind than someone who simply refuses to care about their opinion. Your silence to the fool reads as arrogance. Let it. Your silence is actually freedom. Freedom from the endless, draining performance of justifying yourself to people who have already decided what they think. So here is what Schopenhauer actually teaches us, not as a philosopher locked in a 19th century library, but as a man who understood something timeless about the nature of minds. First, recognize the fool early, not by their vocabulary or their job title, but by their relationship with being wrong. The fool cannot tolerate being wrong. The intelligent person is comfortable with it. That distinction separates them faster than anything else. Second, do not try to enlighten what does not want to be enlightened. You cannot force insight. You cannot argue someone into wisdom. Wisdom is earned through suffering, through reflection, through a willingness to question oneself that most people simply do not have. Stop trying to transfer your insight to those who have not paid the price for it. Third, protect your inner world ferociously, your thoughts, your standards, your sense of reality. These are not up for public debate. Not every question deserves an answer. Not every provocation deserves a response. The greatest act of intelligence is often the refusal to engage. Fourth, understand that your solitude is not failure. The inability to find your level in most social environments is not a flaw. Schopenhauer wrote that a man can be himself only so long as he is alone. The versions of you that get flattened, dimmed, and shrunk to fit the room, those are not your true form. Solitude is where the intelligent person finally exhales. Fifth, play a longer game. The fool wins the argument today. The intelligent person builds something that lasts. History does not remember the loudest voice in the room. It remembers the deepest. There is a particular kind of strength that looks like weakness to undeveloped eyes. It is the strength of the man who no longer needs to prove himself, who no longer wastes his breath converting the unconvertible, who has accepted with a kind of quiet ferocity that most people are not his audience, and that is perfectly fine. Schopenhauer did not make peace with the world by becoming like it. He made peace with it by going deeper into himself, by building something internally that no argument could shake, no fool could reach, and no crowd could take away. That is the path, not louder, deeper, not more agreeable, more grounded, not more visible, more real. You are not broken because you cannot connect with shallow minds. You are not arrogant because you refuse to perform for people who will never understand you. You are not cold because you have learned not to bleed for those who do not value the wound. You are simply someone who thinks in a world that largely does not, and that will always feel lonely. Schopenhauer would not lie to you about that, but there is a difference between lonely and alone. Lonely is absence. Alone is space. Space to hear yourself think. Space to become something the noise would have drowned out. Guard that space. It is everything.